Stanford Law's equity dean is booted out after stoking woke students' rude protest at a conservative judge who was invited to give a talk. So a Stanford dean who was slammed for letting students heckle a conservative federal judge before berating him herself has left her role. Basically, what happened was this judge came to speak on campus. The students protested. He went to basically explain that it was unacceptable, that it was impossible to hear him because he was being spoken over, and she went on to berate him. So she has decided that she's going to be leaving her role as assistant dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are they going to do without her at Stanford Law School to pursue another opportunity? The law school said in an email to its students Thursday. What do you guys think about this story?
Do you think that they have more DEI coordinators at that school? Do you think she was the only one, or do you think Stanford has a couple?
Well, I don't know if you know this, but there is a notorious shortage of DEI professionals in this country. We actually might run out of them, which is very frightening.
It is scary.
Because who keeps the country running?
How do we keep any of this going without them? Right. I mean, there are so many things to critique about the story. First off, let's be glad to see the end of administrative bloat in universities. Famously, that's terrible for any functioning university. This particular story just makes me laugh. We're talking about it a little bit beforehand, but the fact that, you know, this event was on March 9th, and this Trump appointed federal judge Kyle Duncan came to speak. He was invited there by the Federal Society. He gets shouted down. He asked for an administrator. She comes in and is berating him, saying that, you know, he's hurtful and he's tearing this society community apart,
disenfranchising student rights.
Right, but then afterwards,
I hate disenfranchising.
But then afterwards, a couple students wrote for the Stanford Review saying she sent out an email beforehand engineering chaos. She came in with prepared remarks. I really appreciate this from the students. They called Stanford out and said, you say you value free speech, then you need to hold this person accountable because she intentionally went against it. Now, of course, this battle continued to be public, and Steinbach, the woman involved, wrote her own op-ed that the Wall Street Journal published being like, I was just there to de-escalate.
Of course.
I don't know what happened, but it could not have been that I was at all inciting this. And so you get these conflicting accounts. And I find this deeply interesting. She said that she was there to represent the student voices so they could stop shouting, which means that, like, she came in with
and started shouting. Yeah, well, firstly, of course, she was just trying to calm things down. That's what a DEI officer does as a university, at a university.
It's not about dividing people by their identity at all.
Also, I love this excuse. I love this excuse. This is golden. This is like such an incredible attempt at spin. I almost admire it. When all the students were heckling this person, and I went up there and began heckling them, it's because I was trying to stop the students from doing it. I was trying to give them an outlet. This is what I have begun to call outlet theory. Basically, what left-wing people will try to do to justify the normalization of bad behavior is they'll say, this bad thing is going to happen anyway, so we need to give it an outlet. And of course, what you end up doing is encouraging it to continue to happen, and you get more of it. And I think it's not surprising that this is the excuse she went with, because it actually fits into the framework of a left-wing worldview and the excuses they usually make. No, the only reason I was doing bad thing is because I wanted to give bad thing an outlet, because I'm actually against bad thing on some level. It's totally incoherent.
Well, it's funny that she's diversity and inclusion, and she seemed to lack both of those as her role, right? I mean, there was no diversity in terms of intellectual diversity. And what about inclusion? You know, whatever happened, it's funny how, you know, when I was a kid, they would say, well, if you don't like it, turn off the channel, or if you don't like it, don't listen to that album. And now it's the right saying that. If you don't want to go listen to this judge, just don't go to the lecture. Yeah. And it's like, that is not allowed.
Like he got surprised in a class that you had to be in, right? Like, this was an event organized by the Federal Society for him to come to, that everyone probably knew it was going to be this guy, which is what made them want to go there, right? And I'm not against the concept of protesting. It just makes me crazy that the idea is that this person had to be completely shouted down rather than this institution that's supposed to be about learning and growth and having your ideas challenged.
And this is manufactured protesting, because we're all pretty smart, but the exception of this one, name another judge right? Like name another, not Supreme Court, I can name them. Name a federal judge. I bet you none of us really could. So what college student is like, you're telling me Judge Duncan Kyle is, no, like this isn't a name that is like,
That's
hilarious.
It's
That's a really
all
good point.
manufactured.
Because he was appointed by Trump.
It's
that was
all
the whole
manufactured.
point. And I will say,
especially when you're in college, like who's actually reading flyers? You know, like
I certainly wasn't reading them or going to those
Someone
things.
manufactured this crisis and got all the kids whipped up, and now the kids are all in a frenzy, which is sad how much of lemming the college students can become.
so it's interesting then that, of course, the students point out that Steinbach, this DEI administrator, sent out an email about this event.
Yeah.
It's almost like
Yes.
maybe she was interested in there being a protest so she could have a nice
She
viral
had him
clip
come
moment.
down.
Yeah.
She is actually invited.
Did she arrange all of this?
Yeah.
Well, I will say, I think what I found the most interesting about the story, because it's played out over a couple months, is that at least 2 federal judges said, we're adding Stanford to our no hire list. We will not take clerks from Stanford Law, which means that every student at Stanford is affected by this. Of course, I assume they're conservatives.
Yeah.
If you're out there at Stanford Law, I hope you're doing well. But it comes on the heels of a different similar event at Yale Law School. So there are now a stack of law schools that there are judges, and I think this is great. They're saying, I will not hire from your school. I do not like your school and your student body's stance on free speech and diversity, and I do not like the way you're treating conservatives. That's unacceptable to me. You would not be a good fit for my office. And again, I think these small changes, this school district taking a stance, these judges saying like, we won't tolerate it. Of course, some people suffer in the crosshairs. I'm sure the young conservatives at Yale and Stanford are like, well, dang, man.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, good for the judges for doing something and not sitting around being like, well, we can't get involved. And,
Yes.
you know, this, that, and the other.
Push back. If they're going to try to use their leverage against you to undermine civil society, you got to push back. Daniel, you mentioned something earlier, how the left always used to say, if you don't like it, you can change the channel, and how they're hypocritical for not sticking to that. But I think what you're missing is what they were saying is, if you don't like it, you can change the channel. Those are the options that you have. When I don't like it, you change the channel.
Yeah.
It's always been about dominance, right? Evil calls for tolerance until it's in charge, and then it demands your submission.
Yeah, remember when the riots were happening in the summer of love, and even you can go back further, even in the Trump inauguration in 2017, to go off your point, Seamus, when a lot of mayors said, look, we're just giving them space to protest. And you're like, well, you're letting them burn the city down. I was like, we're just giving them space to protest. And that's what this was. That was what this diversity DEI coordinator was saying. I am just giving them a platform to express their ideas, and I partook of it because I wanted to try to control the violence. And again, if you give people a space to do, if you give bad people a space to commit bad acts, they will commit bad acts.
Well, and this is part of what's so hilarious just about how quickly they expose themselves as complete and total unprincipled hypocrites. I remember during the 2020 riots, there were 2 things I kept hearing from left-wing individuals. First thing, rioting is the language of the unheard.
Yes.
Okay, so that's one quote. Let's all just keep in mind.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, isn't that? Thank you.
Really
Isn't
is.
doesn't that just touch your heart?
Poetry.
And then there was a second point that they kept making repeatedly. I saw this all over Twitter. I saw left-wing people I knew saying this. They were going, well, you know, conservatives claim the point of, you know, 2A is to like fight back against tyranny. And why aren't they helping us as we are here trying to fight back against tyranny? So literally, by the way, calling for insurrection, right? And then just a few months later, on January 6th, when we had conservatives rioting, well, all of a sudden the response was to make sure they were as unheard as possible. Ban as many conservatives from social media. Ban Donald Trump. Ban Donald Trump, the sitting president of the United States, from one of the largest communication platforms in the world. You're going to tell me you thought rioting was the language of the unheard, and the way you get rioting is by silencing people, and then you silenced the person
And then criticize
who you
them for
believe
not stopping it.
Exactly. Who you believe is the figurehead in the voice of the people who were rioting. And then all of a sudden, insurrection became a bad thing that we weren't supposed to be in favor of and weren't supposed to tolerate and we're supposed to be very against. Meanwhile, just a few months ago, on May 29th of 2021, left-wing radicals surrounded the White House, broke down the barrier, forced the president of the United States and his family into the presidential bunker, and the entire media laughed about it and said it was so mean that Donald Trump cleared those protesters out of there before they tried to burn down St. John's.
Yeah.
Well, you're forgetting the most important verse in the modern religion, which is, it's okay when we do it, Progressives 23:16.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
You don't understand.
Yes. We got to know the sacred texts.
Because we are on a moral high ground, right? So when we say these people are rioting because they're unheard, we are correct. And when we're saying you guys are rioting because you're evil and the devil, we are also right. There's no arguing there because there's no consistent logic and there's no consistent application of values.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.